But looking under the hood of these businesses, you realize that no one has any idea what they're doing, particularly when it comes to financial management. And I think that is the key, is like the small business failure rate is like, depends what book you read or what statistic you're looking at. It's like 80, 90, 70%, whatever, over 5 years. And so my belief is that accountants should be the people to educate directors, founders, investors on how to run a business, what are the key elements of the finances that you should be on top of to run a sustainable, profitable, cash flow producing business. And I think the gap here is education.
Hello and welcome to Season 2 of the Push Podcast. This is the podcast where we explore the real stories behind what makes entrepreneurs and business owners the successes they are today. I am Jack Ferguson, a small business growth strategist, and I will be your host. I believe the best way to learn and be inspired is to listen to the experiences and stories of those you respect. Their real experiences, their real story, warts and all. Honest storytelling is what this is all about. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast, and don't forget to hit subscribe wherever you are listening to this. Hello and welcome to episode 4, season 2 of the podcast. Today I have a great guest by the name of Jason Andr. Jason is co-founder of SBO Financial, author of Stark Naked Numbers, and a director of the Arbor Group. As you may have heard from the intro, Jason is someone who is very passionate about financial literacy for business owners, and he has sought to bridge the knowledge gap in this space. Like many others, his success hasn't come easy, and we explore his development all the way from starting a lawn mowing business when he was young through to who he is today. We talk about how he sacrificed 3 years of his life when he was younger to further his career. We talk about his journey of self-discovery through travel, including a trip to North Korea. We talk about what it's like to be unhappy building your own business. We talk about what it's like to sack customers, what it is like to write a book, and what that has brought him as a result. I have a great deal of respect for Jason and what he has built. He was very transparent about his story and views, and I'm sure you'll get a lot out of this episode. Let's bring in Jason. All right, so today we're here with Jason Andr, co-founder of the Arbor Group, co-founder of Smart Books Online, or SBO, and author of Stark Naked Numbers. Jason, thanks for being here.
Yeah, it's an absolute pleasure, Jack. I'm so looking forward to this episode with you.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to hearing your story. Well, why don't we start off with what the Arbor Group is, just so the listeners have an idea of what it is and what it encompasses.
So the Arbor Group is a financial services group where our mission is to accelerate the growth of entrepreneurs and digital businesses specifically. So it's a group of companies, not just one business. So it's kind of like the head company of a series of businesses beneath that. So SBO Financial, which is probably what most people will be familiar with as a brand, that is kind of the traditional kind of accounting firm that doesn't do tax. It mostly focuses on like CFO services. We have a more of a M&A and advisory company called Assurity, which is really to help companies that are buying other companies or raising capital. There's more bespoke kind of services around that. And then we have Arbor Capital, which is a funds management business where we invest in growth businesses through private equity or venture capital. So a series of businesses, but ultimately part of the broader group, which is there to partner with entrepreneurs.
Right. And what takes up the majority of your time?
Yeah, so my footprint is mostly in SBO, to be honest, and that is, my role in that business is, I call it product, but it's really, there's a big gap in what I think accountants are currently doing versus the work that we do, and transitioning or retraining accountants in our team to be able to deliver these new services to the market. It takes a lot of time because we're like basically retraining. So forget everything that you knew and relearn.
Right.
So a big part of that is building processes and modules and education. And also sales. So I'm kind of the front end sales guy of that business at the minute, which is also a good thing because it helps us control or vet the quality of the clients or businesses that we work with, because we're not for everyone. And so that's also kind of strategic. Outside of that, we're working on a new business under the group as well, which is called Stark Naked Numbers, based on the book that I've written, which is more, I call it a cross between media, content and digital product. So
really? Okay.
Yeah, so the mission there is to improve the financial literacy of business owners. I think that, Scott Pape and Ramit Sethi of the world, there's plenty of gurus around personal finance, and absolutely it's needed. We can talk about that all day, but when it comes to business finances and business financial literacy, I don't think there's anyone tackling that well, or I don't know anyone that's really tackling it. So we're trying to really solve the problem of business financial literacy for entrepreneurs and founders.
Okay. And is that what triggered the book? Like, did you see a lot of this going on and you're like, I have to write the book?
It's funny because as an accountant and an advisor, and we stand under the hood of many businesses and many small businesses and deal with a lot of founders. And to be frank, small business is a shit show. Like, it is literally so messy. You're dealing with multiple personalities, and it's just like and the government's there trying to like put things, structure things together, and that's what accountants fundamentally do. Most accountants are there to structure information and put it in a format to give to the tax office and get them to pay tax, right? So most accountants actually work for the tax office, if you think of them as agents. So they actually work for they've got there's kind of this dual conflicting role, right? They have like a guaranteed revenue stream from the tax office because it's regulated, right? Everyone needs an accountant to do your tax, but at the same time they're trying to look after the interests of their clients. So it's a weird space, but yeah, but looking under the hood of these businesses, you realize that no one has any idea what they're doing, particularly when it comes to financial management. And I think that is the key, is like the small business failure rate is like, depends what book you read or what statistic you're looking at. It's like 80, 90, 70%, whatever, over 5 years. And so my belief is that accountants should be the people to educate directors, founders, investors on how to run a business, what are the key elements of the finances that you should be on top of to run a sustainable, profitable, cash flow producing business. And I think the gap here is education, because you think of the life cycle or the start of an entrepreneur, and even before even starting your business, you go to high school, you finish your grades, you get a house, you get a car, so there's all these personal financial things which you're not taught about, but you end up getting inevitably, and you learn through trial and error, or you read a book, read The Barefoot Investor or something. But then you start a business, right? Yeah. And you have to deal with a separate set of tax legislation, like dealing with corporate tax or a different tax. You're dealing with the Corps Act, with ASIC. You have to deal with what superannuation is, how to pay staff, what's a BAS. There's like so much complexity around running a business, and a lot of people are just flying blind. They're walking into this, and I think the barriers to entry to be a company director are so low. Like, for me to start a company, I literally go on company 1, 2, 3, or jump on Google, and I can literally incorporate a company in 5 minutes.
Yes.
And I'm suddenly, legally I'm obliged to all these things, which I'm completely oblivious to, right? And so...
Aren't we all?
Yeah, and the scary thing is that there's a lot of businesses who are like running these companies, they're hiring people, so they're suddenly responsible for the livelihoods of other people, right? And frankly, the guy at the top mostly doesn't have any idea what they're looking at or how they're doing. They're just focused on trying to survive, really.
Yeah.
And so I think issues compound. And my belief is that just a little bit of education, a little bit of knowledge at the beginning can really set you up for true success in the long term. And I think that if you speak to experienced business people, they talk about, or successful entrepreneurs, they've been to 2 or 3 or 5 different ventures and they've all failed. The successful guys are like, I failed 3 businesses, and I think they could have just avoided all of that to the beginning if they just had some equipped knowledge at the beginning. Because what you find is they learn from their mistakes later in life. But it's like, well, I'd rather learn from other people, learn from material and start well from the beginning, build the infrastructure, and go from there.
Right. It's really interesting you talked about the failure rate there. And I've talked about it before on the podcast, actually, because you can look at that at the top line, right? And it doesn't look great. And whichever statistic you go with, where it's 50% in 5 years, 70, I've heard all the way through. Startups, you get up to like 96% or something like that. But what was interest to me was why, and I don't know if it's fair to compare a small business who did all the wrong things to someone who did all the right things but got unlucky. I don't think that's a fair comparison. So I suppose my question is, do you put a lot of that failure rate down to a lack of financial literacy?
It's a really good question. I think there are 2 categories of businesses that will fail, that do fail, right? There's one of them is that they haven't done any legwork, they haven't done any preparation, they've just kind of like, oh, I'd love to start this cafe because I think it's a great career change. I hate my job. And so they do it because they think that, being an entrepreneur or being a business owner is very sexy and lucrative because I can control my own hours. I don't want to work for the man, all that stuff. And this is what the franchise industry is essentially, that's the narrative that the franchise industry is leveraging off, right? It's, attracting, non-business people to start a business. Like, we give you the tools, we give you the training, and, we'll help you be your own boss. But what they're sucking him into is that you're actually still an employee, but you work for yourself. And it's a shit job because you're working 10 times as hard with a lot more risk and you don't even get paid. So there's that type of entrepreneur. And I think that, yes, I think financial literacy and planning certainly does help that, because if you actually showed these people like what they're signing up to, they'd be like, oh yeah, too hard. Like, I wouldn't do that. So I think that is, and then the other component is there are, I guess, the more traditional, the tech startups or the startups who are trying to legitimately create a new category of something where it's like very different to starting an accounting firm, for example. Like, for me as a service-based business, my headcount, my expenses are zero, basically. If I'm starting up, it's just myself. And, for me to not go out of business, I just need to not pay myself, right? Like, that's quite simple. But as like a tech company, or if you got a business with a lot of capital expenditure where you have to invest a lot of money into plant equipment or developers to build whatever product, I think then the stakes are higher. And I think, maybe it isn't the level of literacy of the business, which may end up in failure. It is more that the product, you haven't found product market fit, or maybe you haven't, monetized whatever you've got quickly enough to cover your burn rate. But again, like, understanding your burn rate is still very important. It's a financial literacy thing, right? And again, I think a lot of founders kind of leave themselves too late and don't raise quickly enough or early enough, and leave themselves in poor negotiating situations.
It is a bit of a hard truth, isn't it? Sometimes maybe a reason why, not that I've ever done this in the past, but you don't look at the numbers in the bank account and that type of thing is it's depressing.
Yeah, it certainly is depressing. It can be.
Yeah.
For the beginning of business, it is always depressing, because you're like, especially if like the first 2 years are so bloody hard, and you're fighting every day, and you just see that bank account just like nil or negative, and you're just like, God damn it, what am I doing? And it's almost ignorance. It's like, not ignorance, but you want to turn the blind eye to it, because it makes me depressed. So I don't forget about it. Let's just focus on the things that I can control, and make me focus on things that make me happy or make me feel positive. But the stark reality is that the numbers don't lie, and this is the reality. And so I think, and this is from personal experience as well, I think sometimes in those days where you just feel like crap, you just don't want to have to think about it. You just want to hide in your bed sheets, but eventually you have to kind of come to grips with reality and do something about it. And I think that's where my assertion of where the numbers are a source of truth, and they can ground you and help you actually, if you can read them properly, interpret them properly, actually give you signals on what you could do next and how you can improve things.
Yeah, right. Very interesting. All right. So obviously there's a lot of businesses going on now for you, but we want to hear your story. So do you actually remember your first business interest?
Yeah. So I never thought of it as a business, but I guess it was a business. So from an early age, I had an interest in money when I was growing up. So my background, I guess you'll call it fairly humble for a typical kind of Australian lower middle class kind of household. So my dad was in the Air Force, in the RAF, and so we travel a lot through his posting. So I actually grew up in Northern Territory, in Katherine, which is 3 hours from Darwin, and then we moved in Darwin and lived there. My mum, she's Singaporean, so I'm, I guess, half Chinese, and so she immigrated from Singapore, back in, I guess, the 80s, and so she had never really had tertiary education. Singapore back in the 70s was like swamp. It was nowhere where it isn't. So it wasn't where it is now, and it was literally like third world country, literally. She lived in a village and grew up quite in poverty, I guess, is probably the answer to that. So she moved over, married my dad. And so she always found it hard to find full-time work, and so she always worked as a cleaner, or worked at restaurants or cafes or whatever paid the bills, right? And so that, I think, I had an interest in money because I saw that the upbringing that we had, and we had a very full childhood. Like, we did a lot of things, we had lots of hobbies, but it was a lot of things were constrained by money and finances. And so I was interested in learning about money, not only because I wanted to change, I guess, my trajectory of my life and my family, but mostly because I had a really expensive habit, all right? A really expensive hobby, and that hobby at the time was collecting Pokemon cards.
Nice, yep.
And Warhammer. And I don't know if you've come across Warhammer before, that That is bloody expensive. Like
Right,
you're talking of these little, for those unfamiliar, these little kind of plastic and lead figurines that you paint and you build mass armies. And you play like board game type figurines with them, like strategy, war type stuff. And those, like a figurine can cost like $20, and for a 12-year-old, that's a bunch of money. That's a lot of lawn mowing that you have to do to buy a figurine. And that's inevitably what I did. My pocket money at the time in Darwin, we had the temperature up there was about 35 degrees, 100% humidity. It was bloody muggy. And I got paid $5 to mow the family, mow the lawn. And there was a lot of 3 hours in the heat, for $5.
Right.
I guess for me, it was a lot of money. And the grass grew quickly. So, in a month, I could buy a new figurine from my Warhammer collection.
Sure.
But I quickly thought, it's like, oh, man, I could be earning more money. Like, what am I doing for these other weekends when I'm not at school? I could be mowing other people's lawns. So, I guess my first side hustle technically was mowing lawns for people. So, this is pre-mobile phones, pre-internet, pre-Canva or any sexy kind of digital marketing design tools. It was
pre-side hustle is even a term.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't even call it a business. It was just like me mowing lawns for people. But I remember Microsoft Word. Just found one of those free templates of Microsoft Word, garage sale type thing. I wrote, lawn mowing services, Jason's lawn mowing services. Here's the home phone number. It's like the landline. And I literally walked, and we lived in the married quarters, which is in the army, in the RAF base, was where all the other RAF people lived. There's like a section off, whatever. So I walked around with these flyers and knocked on people's doors if they weren't home. If I'm home, it's like, hey, just FYI, I'm doing this lawn mowing service. If they weren't home, put it in their letterbox, right? And inevitably, you hopefully get phone calls. So I told mum and dad, it's like the landline's the only landline in the house. Make sure you answer the phone with Jason's lawn mowing service every time, right? Because my business, man, just got to try to be professional. And so they kept it up for a day, full credit. They're like, okay, we'll play the part of Jason's lawn mowing service, and quickly, that faded because whatever, people get over it. But luckily, because we're in a close community, people know we knew where to find me. It's like this. That chubby Asian kid trying to get some money out of me. So yeah, I actually had some people knocked me up, knocked on our door or called up and actually had some lawn mowing clients or customers. So that was, and I charged $20 a pop for a lawn mowing.
Nice.
And I actually used their lawnmower as well because I was like, wait, how does the petrol work? And do I have to bring my lawnmower to your place? They're like, no, we've got the stuff. Just mow lawns. We'll pay you for labor. That was my first technical side hustle. And the great thing is I got basically 4 times the rate. Started getting $5 a lawn from mum and dad. I got 20. And so eventually I went to dad and said, hey, my market rate has suddenly increased. My market rate's $20. And he was like, yeah, fair enough. But maybe you should start considering paying rent as well. I'm like, okay, we'll just forget about that conversation.
Oh, very nice. So how old were you when you're doing this?
I think probably like 12 or 13
Wow.
is my guess.
That's some hardcore sales for a 13-year-old. Did you have any fear around doing that?
I hate selling. I think selling is a scary thing, but I never saw it as selling. I didn't even saw this as a business, honestly. I just like, hey, I want some pocket money and I've got my spare time and I've got this skill, I guess, of lawn mowing. I can push lawns. Not afraid to do the hard work. Like, how can I leverage that? And it just turned into a little bit of income.
Yeah, right. And that's very impressive. So how long did that last?
It was about 6 months in total. And that's really when I started to, I remember I used to keep my cash. It was all a cash business, right? I'm never going to report this stuff. It's a hobby for tax purposes. But what happened was in Chinese New Year, we get these little red packets, like they're called Hong Paos. And so, every year we get that Hong Pao for gift. But I used to stash all my cash into a Hong Pao. And and my Hong Pao was getting quite big. It was like, it's just cash money. I was like, oh, this is awesome. How do I get more? And then I was like, oh, man, maybe I should get a job. Like, I wonder if I can get a job. And it was quite coincidental at the time. So this is, I think it was like late 90s. Jamie Oliver, like the chef, Naked Chef. He blew up in the scene around that town. And Jamie Oliver has been actually a lifelong inspiration for me. I think he was, at the time, he was so influential. Just this young dude, I think he was like 20 at the time, drives a moped, lives in downtown London, chefs at like, world's best restaurants, and he's just like, living this awesome, cool life. And I really like, I was inspired to be like, oh damn, I want to be like Jamie Oliver. He's like living his really cool lifestyle. And he got me into cooking actually. So he really kickstarted my interest in cooking and food. And so my brother and I spent a lot of our weekends in the kitchen as well. When I wasn't lawn mowing, in the kitchen, like experimenting with different recipes, and we watched like an episode of The Naked Chef, and then we try to replicate it. And eventually we got good at cooking because you just do it enough. And so what happened was, I was like, oh, actually, I want to become a chef. Like, I want to become like Jamie Oliver. And, you think about most Asian immigrant mothers, the narrative, hey, go to school, get good grades, only A+, A stars, get a profession, right? Go to uni,
sure.
Go become a banker, a lawyer, dentist, doctor, insert stereotypical Asian career choice, right? And so when I told mum on my 10th birthday that like I wanted to become, I think 12th birthday, I wanted to become a chef, you can imagine her reaction. It's like, what? You want to become a chef? Why do you want to do that? Like, you know how hard chefs work? You don't want to work in hospitality, blah, blah. And I'm like, yeah, but like Jamie Oliver, like I'm really passionate about food. And mum and dad were the guinea pigs of our kind of wild food concoctions, right? So
sure.
they quickly understood, like, yeah, we could tell you're passionate about food. And, I was quite fat at the time because I was eating a lot as well as cooking, right? So like, okay, yeah, we love food. So it was like, well, you want to work in restaurants? Why don't you start now? Like, let's get you a job in the kitchen, and you can really see whether you like working in a restaurant. And mum's good like that. She's like, yeah, we'll throw you in. Let's see how you go. So again, the Chinese community in Darwin, the Northern Territory, is quite strong. And so she made a few phone calls to a few friends, and actually got me my first proper job, not a side hustle, in a fish and chip shop at Stokes Hill Wharf, which is like a tourist hotspot on the wharf. So it was my first job, and I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't even know what I was just this fat kid rolled up, and they're like, okay. And I think I was like, 12 years old at the time. And like, your job is customer service, right? And you got to serve the customers. And I'm like, okay, cool. What do I do? And they're like, we'll teach you. So they show me the ropes of like how to interact with the public. But the weird thing is at that place, there was no cash register. Okay. So everything was done by paper, right? So literally to take orders, it was like a notepad, one of those notepads with the squares, like engineers use or whatever. And you literally write the order on the paper, and it had codes for whatever you had, and then you'd kind of you write down, but then you put the prices on the side. So they had like a menu list, and I'd have to copy the prices for each. And then I had to actually tally the order by hand, by long equation, right? And so, I'm carrying the ones and like doing, I don't even know how to do it nowadays. You've got calculators for that. But like literally long equation and calculators for every order.
Sure.
And inevitably, these people, like the customers are like, what the hell? Like, you don't have a calculator? Like, let me check your work. So they're like checking my order, trying to basically audit my math. And like, hot tip, like never change an Asian kid at math, honestly. Like, it was flawless all the time. Correct change given. Happy customers. But so that was my first experience of the job. And, a few people did question me. It's like, oh, this kid looks really young. And if anyone asked, I was just like one of the cousins helping out the family business type thing.
Okay.
Yeah, so that was my first job. And I think the interest in money, like the money there was, again, really low. It was like $5 an hour. But again, that was really good coin for me at the time. And I learned a few lessons in that place as well. One of which kind of led me to the accounting profession, oddly, which was, I remember the story, I was after about a few months working in the business, you start to develop your chops. You're like, oh, cool, I'm building rapport, started to find my feet in this little fish and chip shop. So naturally you start to think, oh, well, wonder if I can do anything extra, like improve the business or show a bit of, energy besides just taking orders, right? So I started to look around and see how I can improve things. And one of them was like, every time we refilled the drinks fridge, we'd put the cold drinks at the front and fill them from the back, basic stuff like that. Or even, pre-rolling cutlery with napkins so people didn't have to fidget with that sort of stuff. I remember the one that I thought was ingenious was actually giving like loyalty cards, like where you'd say, hey, because we know it's all repeat customers, it's a pretty nice thing to even Saturday night, people come to the wharf, get fish and chips. So to incentivize them to come back, I was like, hey, why don't we have something where buy 10, get one free, or some sort of discount, which is now commonplace in coffee shops, but I think back then was like very new.
Yeah, you're ahead of your time there.
Yeah, but I think at the time the owners were like, mate, like, yeah, some 12-year-old kid, like, what the hell are you talking about, mate? Just focus on doing your job. And the job at the time was like servicing the customers, and in peak periods, like the line was out the door. Like it was so, like there were, sometimes would wait like half an hour in line just to get these fish and chips, because they were good, damn good fish and chips, really, really good. So the problem at that time was like, we need to solve this line problem, right? So the solution is you get more customer service people, but again, Chinese owners are all tight asses. So they're like, I just need to pump through these orders. And like I knew that whilst I was good at it, like calculating orders on the equation, not efficient, right? You're just not efficient. Particularly the price was like $1.90. Like they're not flat $5 for $5 chips. It's like $5.90 or, $7.80 to try to, the whole, I guess it's the psychology around pricing, to make it sound cheap or whatever. So it wasn't easy. So I thought, whatever. So that was a problem worth fixing, right? So we need to solve the line problem. So I remember it was a Sunday afternoon. It was a bit slow, and it was just kind of like when it was downtime, everyone was like told to clean. So I'm wiping benches, and I was in the storeroom wiping something. I saw a cash register in the storeroom. I'm like, what the hell? Why is there a cash register just sitting here doing nothing? Let's get it. Grabbed it, gave it a bit of a wipe down. It's covered in dust, and I hooked it up to the closest power point, and just lit up to start working. I'm like, oh, perfect. So like hauling this giant cash register out of the storeroom to the front counter, right? And connected up, and then the auntie, she yells over, she goes, "Hiya!" Like Uncle Roger, "Hiya! Jason, what are you doing?" I'm like, dude, we have a cash register here. We can take orders faster if we like put things like, no, I didn't tell you to do that. Put it back where you found it. And I'm like, oh, I was really defeated because I'm like, what? It made no sense to me. So, carried it back, and then she basically scolded me like I was her child, as Asian kind of aunties. And I was like, God damn it, what did I do wrong? And then it was only years later. I didn't trigger the point because I didn't even have the nerve to ask why. Like, I'm going to challenge him. I'm some 12-year-old kid. But years later, I realized that was my first lesson in tax evasion, right? Yeah. And the lesson here is that if you speak to any restaurant owners, particularly immigrant restaurant owners, Chinese, Greek, European, right? They keep two sets of books, right? No bullshit. But there's the set of books that you give to your accountant to do your tax return. And then there's the real set of books, which is how much profit did I make? And I learned quickly that, hey, the more digital systems that you have or more systems you have in your business, the more audit trail there is. So the less audit trail, the better. Hence no cash register. And that was my first lesson in accounting.
Okay, that's awesome. That's geez, I'm cracking up at that. So that's the point when you started getting interested in accounting, or what happened to the chefing?
Yeah, so after working in hospitality, hospitality is a tough game. Like, full credit to people who work in hospitality, because it is really difficult. You work long hours, you're on your feet the whole time. It is stressful, and you get paid nothing. Like, for the amount of effort and time, it is so hard. And I realized that, hey, I love food, but I don't love the hospitality industry. And I don't want to be spending my Saturday nights in the kitchen or serving customers. I want to be at home with my friends and family, or out drinking or whatever. I'll be with my friends. So it wasn't for me, but it didn't. So it's like food, cooking, that's a passion for me, but it's not my career path. It's just not it. So the transition into then like getting into accounting or business was not an uncommon, well, it was uncommon at the time, but makes sense now. So eventually going back to the cash thing. So again, I was buying Warhammer, accumulating. I was becoming the Pokemon master of my high school, sort of stuff. So I've got all these like Charizards and stuff with my blister packs. But so you've got all this material stuff, which is awesome and fun. I had a little hobbies. I also collect comic books, which is really nerdy. But I had all this surplus cash, and my uncle in Singapore, so my all of mum's family, they're all in Singapore, and a few of them run businesses, quite successful businesses now. And every year or every couple of years, we'd go to Singapore to visit them, because Darwin is like literally a 3 or 4 hour flight from Singapore. It's like faster to get to Singapore than it is to Sydney, right? So like, why would you go to Sydney when we go to Singapore? So we'd go there and visit the family. And my uncle Ricky, who's my godfather, He started a business and he's really into like the Tony Robbins mindset, unlocking opportunity. And so he gave us like a bunch of Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within kind of audio tapes, cassettes at the time. But also gave me one book called Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, which fundamentally changed. I read that and fundamentally changed how I viewed money, right? And particularly the cash flow quadrant. And if anyone has read the book or knows of the book, but basically there's 4 elements to the quadrant, right? There's the left side, which is you're an employee or you're a solopreneur, or the S, or self-employed. And that is basically you're reliant on hours. Your income is directly correlated to the hours in the day that you work, right? That's for chumps. Like, you want to get out of that kind of thing. Don't be an employee. Don't be self-employed. You want to be on the right side of the quadrant, which is the B, which stands for business owner, or the I, which stands for investor, right? So the business owner, they create systems, they build wealth by other people working for them, and when they sleep, they still make money, all that sort of stuff. And then investors, even better, because you make money, you turn money to make more money, right? So I was like, dude, I want to be on the B and the I side of the quadrant. Like, I'm a sucker. I don't want to become an employee, right? So I was quickly like, well, how do I put this capital to work? I've got this cash. I was like, I don't know, $800 or something, which is pretty good as like a 12-year-old. Like, I was a 13-year-old at the time. Pretty chuffed. So I was like, how do I spend this money? Or how do I invest the money, rather? So I tried to learn like how to invest, right? And so again, not very many good investing books that I came across besides Rich Dad Poor Dad, because that's very like learning the principles, but like in terms of tactics, it's nothing. So kind of like, oh well, you can talk about equities like the share market or property, but property was just completely unattainable for me because of the money. So I was like, okay, shares is an accessible kind of entry point into investing. So I subscribed to Money Magazine or AFR, one of the things, and started just trying to read about things. And again, this is like early internet days, so Google wasn't really a thing. It was like Yahoo or MSN Messenger and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, researching like how to invest. And it's funny, my mum saw the interest and one of her friends was interested in investing. So we just talk about just business stuff. And I had no idea what the hell I was talking about. I'll just pretend to listen and understand. But I remember once that Virgin Australia, Virgin Blue was listing in the Australian on the ASX via an IPO. I'm like, oh, Virgin, that's like Richard Branson guy, like a big famous personality. And I figured, oh, we fly to Singapore. That's like, I'm technically a customer of the airline, airline industry. That's interesting. Maybe I should consider investing in an IPO. Again, I had no idea what an IPO meant. It was like, oh, okay, this company's issuing shares and they're selling shares. So I set up a CommSec account using my mum's details to buy shares. And we ordered the prospectus of Virgin Blue. So this envelope arrived and this giant package. I don't know if you read the prospectus or tried to read, but they're like these bloated pitch documents, like really shiny, really high quality, very heavy. And there's just like bright colors and there's Richard Branson on the front and all these like sexy marketing jargon. And I was, again, it's like, what this is, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at. So like all good investors, apparently you're supposed to look at the finances, right? So I flick to like the middle of the book and there's like the financials and there's the P&L, there's all these things. Like, I have no freaking idea what I'm doing here. Again, let's kind of try to learn what this stuff means. So I jumped on the internet, dial up speed and trying to like research stuff like what the hell's a financial statement, like why is it, what's a financial year, like why is it different sometimes? And honestly, still lost. I to be frank, had no idea what I was looking at. So I'm like, oh, maybe I have to go deeper, like who are some investors that might give some wisdom. And I came across a few guys like Warren Buffett. Robert Kiyosaki was the first point, but again, he wasn't very tactical with shares. He was more about principles. And so I came across Warren Buffett because he referred to Buffett all the time. So Warren Buffett, I was like, oh, who's this guy? Some old dude, big billionaire. So okay, he could be interesting. But again, Warren Buffett, I've tried to read his shareholder letters, and it's still on my list to do them properly. But he speaks in riddles sometimes, and I think as a young kid, like, it's like, dude, just tell me the answer. Don't like speak in tongues and speak in acronyms and jargon. So I found it really difficult to even understand what Warren Buffett was saying, and he's meant to be the genius investor. But I remember there was one passage he said, and that was like accounting is the language of business. So I'm like, oh, that's super interesting, like accounting. And I was like, I don't know what accountants do. And then, found a rabbit hole of like accounting is like the numbers people behind business. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. If I want to be a good investor and a good business person, I need to know my numbers. And how am I going to learn my numbers? I need to be an accountant. So that was the career path of accountant, I think, is what I want to be. And that's how I got the interest in the profession. I got an accounting degree and then started working in practice. But what I realized in my first job as an accountant was that what I thought, it wasn't immediate. It wasn't immediate realization, but like a few years, and I realized that, what I thought accountants did was very different to what they actually do.
Right. Okay. That would have been an interesting day.
It was. It wasn't. I think it was an accumulation of events, but I think I realized. So I think small business accountants are very tax orientated, and that's what most small business accountants do. Is you do tax returns. Really, you get a file from the bookkeeper, you review it, might do some fix ups, put into your system, press a button, tax return pulls out, and you tell your client how much tax they have to pay. And no, that's the reality. That's 90. I'd say 95% of small business accountants in Australia, globally, most of them do tax returns. And I think what I actually wanted, and I didn't realize this because once you're in a career chain and career path, you just kind of get you're told that this is the path, and you're just like, okay, cool, I'll just do that, and you follow the path. And then there are epiphanies or moments where you kind of, there has to be trigger points where you're like, oh crap, is this what I actually wanted? But what I realized of what I really wanted to be when I started the accounting profession was I wanted to actually learn what the numbers were saying, how to interpret them, and then how to use those to invest or make decisions. And so I realized that in hindsight, I shouldn't have actually chosen accounting. Accounting has been a great foundation because all really good, smart CFOs and finance people have accounting as a base. But I think what I really wanted to be was more of a banker, like an investment banker, or work in finance, where it's not necessarily about how to reconcile a balance sheet or process a tax return, but more about what are the numbers saying. Is this a good business based on the numbers, and what's the growth opportunities of the business? So that's what, not regretting anything, but that's probably what I wanted more so than being an accountant.
Right. Okay. And so you made the decision like late teens to be an accountant, like actually commit to a university, and where did you go?
Yeah, so we were living in Nelson Bay at the time, which is like Port Stephens, which is about an hour out of Newcastle, New South Wales. So Dad was posted there, and we were living there, and then he got posted again and retired, and we moved to Brisbane. So this is 2005, I think. And so, again, I was a bit lost. I finished high school, got my UAI or whatever the term is called, your score, your year 12 score. I'm like, I don't know what to do. I was still a bit confused because I talk about the origin story of like how I wanted to become an accountant, but that was kind of lost through high school. Sure. I studied economics, I studied business. I didn't study accounting because there wasn't accounting in the curriculum. So I knew it was numbers, business, something, and I figured like, okay, let's just choose accounting because I think that's probably what I want. I actually wanted to do economics, but again, there's no jobs in being an economist. You work for the RBA, you have to move to Canberra. So I always see things always from a practical perspective, particularly because of my childhood. It's like, it's about money and being practical. And I think that sometimes limited my creativity as a kid. Like I used to draw a lot. I used to like becoming a chef is a very creative passion, but I think I was always drawn to what pays the bills and what is a stable career choice. And that kind of led me to accountants. Everyone needs accountants.
Makes sense.
In good days and bad days, right? And so there's a lot of comfort and certainty in that profession. And apparently they get paid well, apparently. So I was, when I was in, finished high school, it was that weird time between like applying for unis and like, what do I do? Ended up falling back to what I'm good at, was working in kitchens. So I worked at the pub down the road, just in the kitchen, cooking, just for pay the bills, and applying for unis. And in between the period of which, so I applied for QT and UQ and QT. So that weird time before getting admissions and getting my result, Mum was like, oh, well, if you want to work in accounting, why don't you go apply for firms? Like, why don't you just start now? I was like, oh, that's a really, really good idea. So again, what I did was I jumped on the internet and Yellow Pages and looked at the top like 200 accounting firms in Brisbane. So literally one by one, went through all of them, did a spreadsheet of like who's the firm, who's the contact, email address, phone number, and did a resume, cover letter, and sent my resume to all the 200 that I had, right? Sent it all. And I got 3 responses out of 200, right? So I guess cold calling rates 1%. It's probably about standard, 1 to 3%. One of them was we needed a part-time temp worker to do some filing for us, filing cabinet. I'm like, oh yeah, I guess if I was desperate, I could do some filing. The other one was, it was like, thank you, really appreciate letter. We're not hiring at the minute, but we'll keep your details. And the third one's like, oh, actually, yeah, thanks for, I actually got a phone call. And again, the landline.
Nice.
And mum's like, oh, I've got someone from Prosperity Advisors looking for you. They want to speak to Jason. I'm like, oh. And they're like, hey, this is Tanya. Tanya from Prosperity. We got your resume and your letter. We'd love to chat to you. So come to the city. And so, yeah, this is great. My parents lived in Logan. So I caught the train, caught the rattler to Brizzy and, tried to fit a suit and a tie and all that sort of stuff and looked like an absolute dork. But had like an interview with them. And, and they offered me my first traineeship in accounting when I was 17 at the time, which was the best decision I could have made at that time. The money was $20,000 per annum. It was a full-time gig.
Okay.
I don't know if that's legal anymore, but like it was, for me, it wasn't about the money. It was about the experience. And then I also got accepted at QUT. So what I did was I worked full-time at the firm and then studied part-time at QUT, doing 3 subjects a semester.
Okay. Cool. So very forward-thinking at that age, which is quite common actually on the podcast. Is I hear you guys talking and you were willing to do that at that age for the experience when, a lot of people that age are quite short-sighted.
I don't know if it's a generational thing. I could talk about the millennials versus the Gen Y. I'm squarely Gen Y, but I probably act like a boomer in many ways. I think it is ultimately just attitude, and I think it is the circumstances of which shaped your worldview as well. Coming from I come from privilege in the sense that I have loving parents, and I've come from a very stable household, and I'm a male in Australia and first world country. That is certainly privilege, but I'm not talking privilege that trust fund babies, that different side. So I think that certainly shaped that attitude, or I guess the idea of being a go-getter, which is, I don't think is what I'd call myself, but just trying to change things. I'm like, well, if I don't like something on board, let's try something different. And I think I'm not risk averse, but I like to mitigate risk. So for me to approach joined firms, there's no risk where they're going to say no. I'm not afraid of that because what's the downside? Oh, well, whatever. I'll just keep working in restaurants. No big deal.
Right. Okay, cool. And before we move on, just looking at my notes here, and I do think this seems significant to your story, but I want you to tell us about when you joined the gym.
Yeah. So, I love food, as we talked about. I love cooking. So I was bloody fat. I will openly tell you, I look at family photos and man, I was at probably 15, 16 years of age. I was 98 kilos. I was at my heaviest, and I wasn't tall. I'm quite tall now, but back then I was very wide, and I was always picked on at school. Always kid with, fat, big tits, that type of, and actually in Nelson Bay in Port Stephens, it was actually a bit of a culture shock coming from Northern Territory, where it's a big Southeast Asian community, going down to New South Wales in a beach town, a surf town. I was one of 3 Asian kids in the whole school, right? So, there was a bit of a racial element there, but I was a fat Asian kid, right? Stereotypical Hollywood kind of, that persona. So I got picked on a lot. And I know that probably helped me now to build that thick skin, because I was bullied and, picked on, whatever. Not physically assaulted, but just teased. And, I think it was after high school or whatever, I was just I need to do something about this. I can't be just a fat kid all the time. So I decided I need to join the gym, right? And the gym can be a very intimidating place. And it was for me particularly because I was obese, and I didn't know how to use the equipment. And this is in the first year of joining the accounting firm as well. And that was the thing. I knew I wanted to change my image. So I'm wearing suits every day. It's hot. I had to make suits, shirt and tie in the Queensland summer. And so, being 95 kilos doesn't help that, all the sweat. So I was I need to change it. So, so I started off signing up to a gym, which was my first gym experience, and sitting on the treadmill, walking on the treadmill, and I always did the treadmill, right? And it was, trained 3 or 4 days a week. And, after a week, you check the scales, you look at yourself, and I'm fuck, there's nothing happening here. Do it again, check the scales, look in the mirror, fuck, nothing happening again. And so I decided to get a trainer because I realized that I don't know what I'm doing, and I should get help, right? Like just seek advice, like from a professional. So I engaged a PT, and that was very expensive for me at the time, $70 a session for an hour a week, and I'm earning 20 grand a year, including super. Like it's a big part of my paycheck.
Sure.
But I was like, I need to do this for me. And so, over time, you just do the work, and then I'll stop checking my scales because I'm like, this is disheartening in many ways that for people that look at their bank account, right? It's just like, don't look at that. Just focus on the process. Focus on doing the work, show up, do the work. And eventually, like I lost a bit of weight. And one thing I realized is, well, two things I realized is, number one, everything's a process, right? Everything, whatever you do, it's just the process. You have to learn to enjoy the process, not the outcome, because the outcome sometimes is elusive. Because I didn't really have a goal. My goal wasn't to get to a target weight. My goal was to be, to be fit and comfortable with my appearance. Really, it was about looks more so than I guess being healthy at the time, which is probably for most teenagers is the goal, right? Get a girlfriend, all that sort of stuff, look good in the mirror. But the other thing was get help. I think a lot of people are afraid to reach out for help and pay people to get the help. And I think I learned that, hey, that was a lot of money for me at the time, but it was certainly worth the investment.
Yeah, sure. Great story. So all right, from that point on, going through uni and doing your traineeship at the accounting firm, what was that process like? What was that experience like? What were you thinking? Who were you becoming at the time?
It was I look back and I remember I was working full time and I was learning. I was working extra hours to learn. So I was working, probably 50 hours a week at the firm full time. And then at night I would study 3 subjects a semester. So the routine, and I was living with mum and dad in Logan. So the train commute to the city every day was at least 45 minutes, sometimes, including express. So I get up and I go to the gym, right? So I was training. So every morning, my ritual, and I remember it because it was so grinding at the time, was wake up, the alarm went off at 4:15. I'd go to the kitchen, boil some eggs, that was my breakfast. I'd kind of like try to wake myself up, get the eggs. Dad would actually drop me to the train station, which is really nice of him. So he's an early riser. Drop me to the train station. I'd kind of like pass out in the train, like try to get some sleep. I'd arrive in the city at about 5:45 or 6, and then I'd train. So sometimes I was PT, sometimes my own routine. So I'd train for half an hour to 45 minutes, and then I'd have a shower, get to the office, and I'd work from about 7:30 a.m. So always one of the first in the office to work, and then I'd work through till 6, and lunch breaks and stuff, but work. Then 6 p.m, uni started, so I'd walk over to QT Gardens Point, do my 2-hour lecture, 1-hour tute. And then by the time that was 9:30, catch the train home. So I was only home at 10:30 at night.
Oh my God.
Eating dinner. And then I'd do that every day.
Okay.
Uni was 3 days a week. But that was basically the routine. So I grinded really hard for that 3-year period. And I realized I burnt myself out. But I don't remember what I did in that 3 years. I had no social life. My 18th birthday did nothing. It was just it was depressing for me at the time, but again, it was just grinding. I was just doing the work, and again, there was no goal. It was just just work.
Okay.
And so I realized I lost 3 years of my life, and it was actually quite challenging because I remember you look at the university experience, look at the movies, even my friends who were living in colleges and were living full time on campus, taking photos of them Facebook. Facebook previously was MySpace, now it was Facebook. So taking their Facebook photos of them at toga parties, and they got all their friends and they're drinking, and man, I really wish I had that, and I think I felt a bit down by that at the time. But I always knew that this uni thing is short term. I can kind of get out of the grind. Eventually did, but what happened was, 4 years out of that, I realized that I didn't really get the gap year that a lot of my friends had, and I really didn't get the university experience. So I wanted the gap year experience, and so decided to go backpacking for a year, which was kind of the journey from then. I was like, okay, I'm just going to park my career for a bit, and I'm just put everything on pause. Nothing's going to happen. Let's disappear and focus on something else, which isn't work. and so decided to go backpacking solo through Southeast Asia and Asia generally for close to 15 months. Just my backpack.
Wow. Yeah,
walked,
right.
We just jumped on a plane and just went and traveled.
Okay. And what did you find on your travels?
The few transformational experiences of my life, that was certainly the first catalyst of it. I was certainly a journey of self-discovery, and I think that is a cliche in so many ways. It's it's glib, but it was literally that. Like I think what I remember at the time was like, I am not chained to anything anymore. I've got nothing holding me back. I've got runway, I've got my personal savings, I've got a budget I can work with, which stretch very far in developing countries. And I can do whatever the hell I want, right? I'm accountable to no one except myself, and I can be the person who I can test things. I can test if I'm being someone else, or try these things and not have any ramifications really, except my safety, which is fine. So yeah, did everything as much. So I went Borneo, trekked mountains, went to Mount Everest base camp, did a big circuit, spent a month in the Himalayas, walking around every day, literally. Trained Muay Thai in Thailand, rode a motorbike up Vietnam with a couple of friends, and so lived in China for 3 months studying Kung Fu and Mandarin lessons, and so a bunch of variety of random activities. And I think what I learned was I love travel. Like I love the culture and the food and just meeting new people. What I don't like is holidaying, right? And so I think the difference there is you go to a country to holiday where you just want to sit on the beach and unwind and whatever and, drink and whatever. But I think the difference, I was doing that for the first month or 2 months, and I realized I felt a bit shallow. Like you go to Siem Reap and you go to see the Angkor Wat and you tick the box, and you go ride an elephant in Thailand, you tick that box, and you just box ticking, which I think is very much what people do is travel now, because they tick the box to show their Instagram story, right?
Go do it for the gram. Yeah.
Exactly right, exactly. But for me, I was like, I hated that. I was doing it. I'm like, man, this is boring, and I felt lost. And so I realized I need to do activities to keep myself entertained, but also feel like I was developing in some way. And so I ended up doing things like programs like Muay Thai. I trained for 3 weeks, and that was again to shed a lot of fat that I accumulated from drinking heavily and eating heavily. And then like the Kung Fu, trained Kung Fu for a month, and that was another experience. And so doing experiences within the country helped me to develop a deeper sense of the culture and the people around that as well.
Sure. And is this when you went to North Korea?
Yeah. So this is a funny thing. So halfway through my trip, so when people, the whole North Korea, so I went to North Korea,
right.
So for those, I went to North Korea, and not to be confused with South Korea, which is the country you can go in freely. North Korea is the one run by dictatorship. And actually, the idea of going to North Korea started as a pub joke, right?
Really?
So like years ago, the close friend of mine, we were just like a couple of workmates who were just sitting down at the pub, we were just talking garbage, and we're just talking about all these countries we'd love to go to. And one of my friends like, North Korea, I'd love to go to North Korea. I'm like, what the hell, North Korea? And like, okay, let's just, and we researched, apparently we go to North Korea. I'm like, all right, cool. And then we're in China. I'm like, hey, we should go to North Korea. Remember that? I was like, yeah, okay, fine.
Really?
So it was all a pub joke. And so we went to North Korea. It's all a fully packaged guided tour. So you're with this agency, which was run by this drunk UK British guy. Like he's like, short, fat dude, really thick British accent, but also speaks Mandarin. So he runs this called Young Pioneer Tours, right? There's this like backpacking style tour group for adventurous backpackers, and that was how it was marketed. I was naturally attracted to that, but they were offering a 5-day North Korea tour, and what they do is all inclusive, that you're paying the money, and you take to North Korea, that you fly into Pyongyang from Beijing. Pyongyang is the capital city of North Korea. Fly in, and they put you up in this epic hotel, and they have these state government state tour guides that chauffeur you around Pyongyang specifically. So they show you the things that you want to see, that they want you to see, right?
Sure.
And Pyongyang is a beautiful city. It is. It's what you would expect from most communism, like this 80s type thing, but like lots of marble, The hedges and the guns are very well maintained. There's giant statues of Kim Jong-un and Il and Sung all everywhere. And it's a beautiful city. And the people you're there, they're just wearing like, shades of green or like in uniforms, and just kind of like people just walking around in groups. And yeah, you couldn't really interact with the locals because I think it was illegal for them probably to interact with you.
Wow.
And you wonder, people always ask me, what's it like in North Korea? And it's kind of like Disneyland is probably the best way to describe it, because
right.
it looks so beautiful, and it's like everything is a wonder. Have you been in Disneyland? Or
I have, yeah.
Yeah, so I went to Disneyland. I remember my first time we went, and like, oh my God, as a kid going to Disneyland, you think this is incredible. It is like, everything is amazing. It's exciting. So much everything's interesting, right? Mm. You go to North Korea, I had that same feeling, because like, oh my God, this is North Korea. Like, look at that statue. Like, what's that thing say? And everything is amazing. And you're fully in the moment, present, just observing. And I think, yeah, that's the best way. But why it's like Disneyland is not in the shock factor of like an awe of, wow, I'm here, but also it's fake, right? Mm. And that's the other element. Like, that this is just for show. We know, like whether the people in the country know, I'm sure they do, but there's a darker, more sinister narrative to how this country's operated, and we don't see it, but we know that there's actors everywhere. And so it's very much like that. And I think what I wanted to do was, and this is after 6 or 7 months of traveling, I really wanted to connect with culture, like just really understand and talk to people, like just to understand like what their story is, and just understand the narrative of the country and what shapes them as people. And I didn't really get the opportunity to do that in North Korea because you couldn't interact with the locals. The best you could get was the tour guides, but the tour guides are very blasé. Everyone's like asking very direct questions about like, wait, so do you get paid, or like what's like, wait, can you leave the country? Do you have a passport? Like, and they're just like, oh no, and the answer's like, I like to travel, like very vague, like non-descriptive answers, right? Which is fair enough because that's their job. But so we flew in, and after the 5-day tour, it was like this loose kind of thing, and it was great. But what we were doing, we caught this train back to Beijing. So we flew in via a Koryo Air, which is the North Korean airline, and then we took a train back to Beijing overland. So it was all these Russian trains, right? Because the Soviet were supporting North Korea at the time. So it was this Russian sleeper train tracks all the way to Beijing. So that was a 24-hour sleeper. So we're in this train, like everyone's like reflecting on like crazy 5 days in North Korea. And I remember, so it was like 1 a.m. in the morning. I woke up out of the sleep, and I needed to go to the toilet. So I went out, used the bathroom, and I was walking back to my carriage, my room, and this guy popped his head out. So it was this guy called Fabian. He was part of my group. He was a German dude. There's a lot of Europeans in the tour group. So he saw me. He's like, hey, Jace, like, I'm not going to do the German accent. He's like, hey, he came to the room. I'm like, oh, what's going on here? And he sits in, and he was sharing a room with a few North Korean guys, like some older gentlemen. And he's like, hey, come in. And everyone's got like beers. There's kimchi. This guy's like eating crab in the room. And this guy's like smoking. He's like, oh, what's going on here? Like, oh, yeah, come join us. I'm like, yeah, sure. He cracks open the beer. This North Korean dude is like, yeah, have a beer and some soju. And this North Korean dude can speak English, like broken English, but like enough to converse. And I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, so yeah, they're asking my story, like, oh, you look like Chinese, or are you from China? I'm like, oh no, I'm like Australian. He's like, oh, Australia, like kangaroo. I'm like, yeah, kangaroo. He's like, yeah, you should come to Australia one day. He's like, like laughing. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. So now we're all like, after a few sojus and some beers, we're like, hey, let's ask him some questions. Like, let's really get to know the story here. So it's like, so what are you doing to China? Like, where are you going? He's like, he's like, my job, I deal with China government. Oh, very stressful, so many problems. Like, oh, so what do you do for the government? What's your actual job? It's like, problem solving, many problems. Like, again, very like nondescript. Like, I swear they train them like
problem solving.
Yeah,
that's every job.
Exactly. And then we're just like, okay, well, we just keep asking questions. Again, the same vague answers. But like all of a sudden, he grabs my hand, right? And he gets my hand and gets me to grab his ear. I'm like, well, dude, and I grabbed his ear, and it's a bit mangled, and it felt really rubbery, like a fiberglass type ear. And I was like, oh, what's going on? He's like, oh, wrestling. I'm like, huh? He's like, and he went to tell his story. Like back in, he was actually an Olympic wrestler for North Korea. So he represented North Korea in the Olympics as a wrestler in 1972 in Munich, right? And that was interesting because Fabian was the German guy. I was like, speaking to Dutch, and it's like, yeah. And they're all like conversing a little bit of German. So everyone's like cracking up laughing. And it's hilarious because it's not only the fact that, we're in this train, but it's the fact that we're in a train from North Korea with a North Korean guy who was an ex-Olympic wrestler, like drinking beers with him. Like it was so surreal at the time. This is like ridiculous. You couldn't script this in the movie. But he goes on to tell his story. So what happened was he the Munich thing and, got some sort of medal, came back, and then his dad was like, "Oh, you can't be a wrestler for the rest of your life, man. Like this is not a long-term career strategy. Your health will fail you, blah, blah. You should get a job," right? As most Asian parents would say, get a professional job. Going back to my childhood, it's like, oh, okay. So he ended up getting an economics degree at the University of Pyongyang, the university there, where he learned a bit of English as well. And then got into international business, and then apparently his job is like trade relations with China because they're trade partners basically.
Problem solving.
Yeah, problem solving. Yeah, exactly. Many problems. But he cut to the chase. I'm like, going back to the kangaroo store. I was like, when will you do business with Australia? Like hint, trying to again angle my way into to him getting understanding what he does. He was like, and then he kind of like stopped and he looked at me directly and he said, and he said something really, really profound. He said, in this room, our government, our politics aside, everyone's fighting. Not even 60 or 70 years ago, everyone was fighting with Germany, right? And Fabian's here sitting next to me. Like everyone hated Germany, and the whole world was at war, right? But now, 60 or 70 years later, we're all friends, right? Like it's in the past. We'll move on. And he goes, yeah, our governments might be fighting and I might be trying to solve all these hard problems, but in this room, in this carriage, we're just people, right? And I'm just like you, you're just like me, we're all friends here and we can have a drink and we can share crab and kimchi in this room together and talk and connect as humans, right? And I was like, oh man, we're just people. And fundamentally, life is a lottery. Like it is, like we're all just the same people, but it's literally just where you were born. Really dictates like kind of your life. And I think that was really helped me have a lot of gratitude for where I was fortunate to be born in a first world country in Australia of all places where, we've got running water, we've got lots of food. And yeah, it was quite a humbling experience.
Yeah, right. That's fascinating. So you went into China. Then is this coming to the end of your trip?
This was about halfway. So we're about month 8. I spent a few more weeks in China. Went to Nepal and spent a month in the Himalayas just trekking, and then down to India and then Japan, and that was kind of the end. Cool. Of that journey. So it was about 14 months in total.
Sure. And what did you do when you got back to Australia?
Yeah, I was a bit lost, as you would probably appreciate. I've come back from this crazy experience where I learned a lot about myself and I thought I learned a bit about the world and people. And then you come back and nothing changed. Nothing changes at all. You think you disappear for 18 months and you think something changes. Nothing's changed. I mean, the same people doing the same thing. And I got to my desk and I'm like, man, this is doing the same work, got a promotion, but I'm still doing the same thing. And, I felt like I need to do something better. Like there's more to do. And I think I did go, it was a mini depression. People talk about travel as depression. It's like you come back and nothing's changed. And like, oh God, what, should I just go back and travel again? Maybe that's what I'm destined for or what I want to be doing. But so I did try to do like longer holidays. So I made a pact with myself where I try to do like a 4-week holiday every year, or maybe a 6-week where I can immerse myself in the country. So next holiday I went to Cuba and spent a few weeks in Cuba. Again, a bit alternative, but trying to go to weird countries. But that wasn't filling a void for me because I knew that I had to still do something practical, right? I can't just be this. Yeah, when you go traveling or backpacking, there's these dudes or women and dudes that have been traveling for ages, and they're just like a bit older. They're like in their 40s or their 30s. They've come from a divorce or a separation or a career, and they're just kind of like floating. And they're traveling and they're like smoking weed and they're boozing every night, and they're trying to be the cool guy, but that they're lost. That they're escaping something, or they haven't got a goal, or there's something missing, and so they're using travel as a time and a space to find themselves, which is, I think, travel, if you're not sure what to do with yourself, or if you're stuck in a rut, I think there's two things you do. Is you either study, you learn something, or you travel. I think they are the automatic go-to. And so I think a lot of people are like, I'm not going to study, I'm going to travel. And so I learned scuba diving when I was overseas, and a lot of the dive masters there, or learned to be dive masters, were actually these type of people. They're a bit older, career break or some significant event, and they're just, I'm going to learn how to scuba dive in Thailand and hang out for a bit. So I didn't want to become one of those people, because I think that's a slippery slope where if it's like, you just, again, you're not here, you're not there, you're just kind of plateauing, or just, and that's not me. I just want to be doing something more. And so I was in my career, and I realized, reflecting on why I came to the profession again, I was really reflecting on, shit, I don't want to be doing tax returns for the rest of my life. I need to be doing something more with my time or with my energy, or learn something new within my career. And so I've always wanted to work in corporate finance, and what that is basically doing deals, valuations. So really engaging in the numbers in a way that I thought that's how accountants should engage with numbers. And again, get away from the tax. Let's focus on storytelling, numbers, valuations, buying companies. Like, that's interesting. So I got shifted to the corporate finance team after a lot of discussions. So shifted there, and I learned a lot in 2 or 3 years. And I loved it. I was like, yeah, this is the type of work I want to be doing. I was looking at numbers very differently from a tax perspective. And to be honest, that's how I built a lot of the chops that I have now, is through that experience. So what happened was, I was working that for 2 or 3 years. And, after a while working in like a big accounting firm, any white collar profession, it's like the bureaucracy in corporate world really just seems to gnaw at you. It's just like, same shit, same personalities. It can be toxic if you don't frame it in the right way. And so that was becoming apparent for me. I was like, oh man, I hate wearing a suit. Like, this is stupid. But what was a catalyst was my business partner, my now business partner, Rowan. We went to uni together. He was also studying part-time at QT. We did a few accounting lectures together. And when I came back from traveling, we just kept in touch. He's like, hey, Jace, we should catch up. I've quit my job. He was at another accounting firm. I'm working on startups. And this was like 2012. Like, what the hell is this startup? Like, what? Like 2013 is like very early. And like, I'm doing this tech business. I'm like, this is weird. So catch up with Rowan, and he's telling me about like started working in these companies, and they're building some music app or this software thing. I'm like, dude, this is, I don't understand it. Why are you raising money? What do you need to raise money for a business for? Like, isn't that a bank? Like, why don't you just like get people together and build it? Like, why do you need capital? Like, it's very, very early. It's like, but what he was doing on the side, he was doing virtual CFO work. He was like, I'm realized that people need bookkeepers to do their accounts. I'm just doing this to pay the bills because I'm just trying to work in these startups. They're going to get paid. So it's like, it'll be cool if we could incorporate like the software business model and accounting, because, and this is when Xero, the accounting software, was kind of just emerging into the scene. And so cloud technology was like really very, very early in its infancy. And so we were like, put this idea. I'm like, oh, this business thing. I was like, and then this whole idea of talking about business was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I wanted when I was a kid. Like, this now is all connecting. It's like, yeah, actually business is a perfect thing, because it helps me fill this void, and it can create me money, and it's something I can build on, right? So yeah, business, awesome. So we tried to crack this business, which is smart books online. And so we're like, what do we start this business? We offshore some work and we learned a lot of lessons. But the name came about. We were sitting in, we were working on this after hours, after our day jobs. It's like, what do we call this thing? Because all online bookkeeping. It's like, all smart people use it. And a couple of accountants trying to be creative. So Smart Books Online, which is our old name, now SBO, is the acronym. So yeah, that was the business. And so we ran that as like a side hustle, my second side hustle after lawn mowing for about 12 months. And so, again, that was a shit show. Like we organized some contractors in India who did all the bookkeeping. We tried to employ bookkeepers in Australia to look after clients. And because the tactic at that stage was that we are accountants. I worked in practice. I had a pool of businesses that needed bookkeepers, and it was and still is a legitimate strategy to start that business, because the bookkeeping industry is very fragmented and still is very fragmented. It's kind of a lifestyle business for a lot of people, where our goal was to corporatize it, make it consistent, run it like an accounting firm, basically, put some standards behind it. And there's no big four of bookkeeping, right? It's like, why is that? It's like, oh, it's a lifestyle business. Yeah, so let's corporatize it. So that was the goal, and we did an okay job, but it wasn't going anywhere because we weren't putting in the hours required to make a business successful, right? Particularly an early stage business. So.
But you were working in it full time at this point?
Oh, no, not at all.
Not
so
yet.
it was still
Okay.
a part-time thing. So,
Sure.
and this is the thing and this is the dilemma I had at that time, is like, well, what do I do? Like, I've got this kind of business. It's not, there's no money in it. Like, we've got a couple of employees, but they're not really employees. And they had some revenue, but not much. It's like $2,000 a month of revenue. It's like nothing. But I've got this like awesome career path, which I was doing work I really enjoyed. And I was a bit torn, like, do I do the business thing, or do I just focus on the career and work in this really good work I really enjoy doing? And I was doing that for 12 months. It wasn't keeping me up at night, but it was like, I need to eventually make a decision. And what was the eventual catalyst was a couple of the partners that I worked for at the firm got the shits with the company and left and went to a competitor. And they tapped me on the shoulder. It's like, hey, Jason, we've set up a team there. Do you want to join? And I was like, oh, interesting. Now is crux time. Like, now is to make the decision. So I remember having one discussion with the partners. Like, okay, well, here are my two options, right? I do this, I work with you guys, and we build this thing. But again, I'm still working for you, but I'm still learning, and I've still got a lot to learn. Or I just like call all and just go crazy and start this business thing. And I think there was one thing that really helped me solidify my decision in the end, which was eventually the business, was, do I want to trade value or do I want to create value, right? Financial value. So trading value is, I can trade my time for money, or do I want to create value? I can create a system and create something that will be basically an asset for myself. And that was it. And I was like, okay, stuff it. Let's just get into this business thing. So quit my job and worked and jumped in full time into my business, and started probably the hairiest 18 months of my entire life. The stresses of starting a company, no money, learning everything. It was difficult.
So what were the first couple of months like, or the first month? Do you remember those early days?
I have recollection. So I didn't pay myself for 18 months in the business, and that is, it sounds like, and I'm not doing that as a badge of honor. I was like, that sucked very badly. Yeah. So I had runway because I did have some cash reserves. So I had literally just over 18 months of runway in my bank account, personal savings. So I trimmed back all my expenses. I had a mortgage, bought a house, and had the mortgage to service. And so I worked out my runway because it's like, again, I didn't call it a runway, which is a startup jargon term. It was like, how much cash do I have? What are my expenses? How much time do I have before I run out of cash? It's very simple. Strip back my expenses and like, okay, let's try to make this thing work. And so, it's bloody hard. Like, consumed a lot of books. My job was selling, right? Like, you don't have customers, you need to find customers. And so, reading a lot of books, trying to learn how to sell, learning how to differentiate our product, and our product pivoted. When I say pivoted, it changed a lot.
Okay.
Our service changed a lot. Learned a lot of mistakes. Learned a lot, but eventually found our niche, or found our kind of sweet spot and worked. And even that experience in starting a business actually was the best education I could have had as an accountant, as a technical accountant.
Right.
And I think that was a very eye-opening experience for myself. And it's something I write about in the book of Stark Naked Numbers, is because a lot of the stuff that I thought I taught or preached as an accountant, as a technical, like, I will give advice, right? Clients would pay us in my previous life as a corporate accountant, clients would pay us like $700,000 an hour for advice, right? The advice was garbage. Like, it was like inflated, full of jargon. It was just like pages of shit. And I realized when I was in my business, I'm like, okay, now I have the empathy of a business owner. I don't care about like this 10-page memo. Like, just tell me the answer, or tell me what these things mean and how can I use them. And so what I realized is I was actually starting to use tactics from my professional training in my own business. And one of those of which I can talk about was like calculating profit of customers. It sounds like a very simple thing, but not many people do it. How it worked was we were, probably 8 months in the business, we're starting to get traction, signing up a lot of clients, and then we were trying to backfill that with staff. My business partner and I made a decision at the beginning that we don't want to be on the tools. Like, we should, if we do this properly, we need to be orchestrating rather than in the business. And that never had that. That was aspirational.
That's good theory.
Everyone's getting their hands dirty, right? We're doing accounting and bookkeeping.
Sure.
which sucked at the time. But anyway, so we're doing the work, and what was happening is we're like growing revenue, but like we had to add more staff to cover the revenue. And so we had, we're turning over quickly, or growth was good, staff was good, but like we had no money. I'm like, what the hell is going on? So we took a step back and was like, if something's broken, we need to fix this. And because again, if you're in the business, it's hard to objectively stop and take it and reflect, particularly if you're stressed and you got no money and it's just a confluence of shit. Right?
Yeah.
So business partner and I was like, hey, we need to fix this. Spent a Sunday afternoon in the boardroom. Like, hey, let's kind of objectively analyze our business, right? Take a step back, higher thinking. Let's look at this objectively. So we start by looking at the numbers. We start with, okay, what clients do we have? How much revenue are they bringing in a month? What do they cost to service that revenue through timesheet data or touch points? Basically, simple Excel table. Who's making us money? Who isn't making us money, right? And what that simple exercise we did in a couple of hours helped us understand, well, who are the customers we should fire and who are the ones we should keep or double down on. And it was interesting because not only financially, it told a story of like, we need to sack these people because it's actually make us more money, but it helped us identify our target market. So we not quantified it, objectively quantified it, but then looked at it from a qualitative perspective. Yep. It's like, who are the people we actually like doing and who value our service? Who are the ones who we hate? And coincidentally, all the clients that made us money and we love working with were digital businesses, digital agencies, a couple of online retailers at the time. They were like great business to work with, and software companies like startups. And then we had like, the plumber, the tradie who is shit with receipts, the cafe owner who just gives you a shoebox. And we're like, okay, they're not for us. These are the ones for us. And that actually helped that process. Again, it wasn't intentional, but the process of looking at our numbers purely from a financial perspective actually unearthed insights about our target market and who we enjoy working with, and actually set the scene of our marketing strategy and even business strategy going forward, where we exclusively work with digital businesses. We're not for the corner store cafe, we're for the e-com entrepreneur, we're for the SaaS founder. And that was 3 years ago. And that was, again, an example of how I was able to learn the corporate kind of, advice experience, but actually apply that to a practical setting.
Okay. Yeah, really, really fascinating. So how happy were you to fire your customers? Like, I mean, that it's easy to just say it, right? But how about actually doing it?
Oh, it was savage. Like, it was not an enjoyable moment. And again, it's one of those moments where you need to be super stoic about it, and it's not personal. It's not like you can't beat yourself up. It's like, hey, here's the game plan. We need to execute it. And it started off with a simple email. It's like, hey, and what we're trying to do is not. You don't want to have a discussion, right? Because it's not worth anyone's time to fight over a fee. It's like, this is not working. This is it, right? And it's not as if we're married. They're just clients, right? People sack clients all the time. People separate from business relationships all the time. It shouldn't be a big deal. So it was a very stoic email. It was like, hey guys, we worked out that we did a review of our business. We can't do this sustainably. For us to continue, our new rate is X per month. And that's the rate effective as of next month. We didn't have lock-in contracts as all month to month, and that was flexibility for both of us, which still works in our favor today for both parties. However, if you don't accept that or you think it's not appropriate, let me know and I can happily refer you to an alternative provider. So give people the option. It's like yes or no. You either suck the price increase up, cool, happy days, we'll keep going. Because if you increase their prices, that almost makes it worth it to service them, because at least you can pay properly.
Yep.
The alternative is like, oh, you can go somewhere else. There's probably someone else that's more suitable for what you need. Let me know, I can refer you. And so, again, business people, business owners, everyone's busy, right? You don't want to have to, more decisions you give people to make, it's just harder. It creates friction. It's like binary option, A or B, and that's it. Red pill, blue pill type thing. And so it wasn't, I thought, it's like all these narratives, like if something seems really hard, you build up angst and like, oh man, it's going to be difficult. I'm really dreading this. But it was actually a very, very simple process. And actually, I think ultimately, while it's shitty at the time, I think those business owners really respect you for it, because they're like, okay, cool. I get it. That's cool. We felt that we weren't getting the best service anyway. Thank you for letting us know. Like, rather than trying to drag this on, it's like pulling the Band-Aid off slowly. Let's just move on. And so we actually, it's in the book, that whole tactic and that story, but also we give that they give that advice to our clients today, like particularly service-based businesses. We're like, okay, let's start by analysing profitability of your customers. Like, where are the gaps and what do we need to do about it?
I'm sure that's always an eye-opening experience for your clients.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
It's and there's we start with the macro, like, hey, where are the gaps here? And like, okay, well, let's look at the micro, and they know it. They kind of know gut feel, but it's until you quantify, like, oh crap, okay, all right, okay.
I can see it in front of me now.
Yeah.
And everyone's got some sort of story when they've started a business about the day or the moment where it was like, what the hell have I got myself into? This is bullshit, whatever. Do you have one of those?
Every day. But I remember there was one day in particular. This is like 6 or 4 months in. I was just like beating myself to the ground. I ride my push bike. So I was living in Greenslopes, which is about 5 k's from the CBD. I was working out of the co-working space in Spring Hill. And ride my push bike every morning, part of my kind of ritual to get into the zone. Ride my push bike, it's like a 20-minute ride, which is a good clearing the air type thing. Get in the office at 7 a.m, do the work, go home, rinse and repeat, right? So it was a weekend. I was working on a Saturday. I came into the city, parked my bike outside. There's a bike lock outside, worked, and then I'm like, I can't be arsed riding home. I'm just going to take the bus. So I took the bus, left the bike overnight. So Monday morning, took the bus in, and my bike was gone. It never got stolen, right?
Right.
And you know what? It's just a bike. It wasn't an expensive bike. It was like one of those mountain bikes, but it was my only mode of transport at the time. I was trying to save money. I took the bus or rode my bike most of the time to save a bit of coin.
You're not paying yourself.
Not paying myself. It was literally, it was a kick in the teeth. It was someone that's like, for fuck's sake, like, oh, like really? It's a bike, come on. Like, why steal something else of value? Like, not my bike. And that really took me, it really hurt me. Not deeply, but it was very frustrating. I remember sulking about it, and my parents are thankful to give me a bit of money to lend me a bit of money to buy a bike, which I eventually paid back. So, and it sounds silly, but like I think in those moments where you're super vulnerable, it's just that little thing that just takes you over the edge.
Yeah, I don't think that sounds silly at all. It's I can imagine you're trying hard to get this thing going, and life just kicks you in the teeth one more time and we'll take your bike. Thank you.
And again, this is all relative, right? I mean, our problems are literally first world problems. Some of the stories that people you meet overseas, and it's just polar opposites, but again, confluence of events.
That's your experience. That's what happened. So
exactly.
All right. So you're talking about when you guys did that, started firing a few customers, and you did that analysis. Is this a time when you started to feel like things were turning around? Is that the time, or did it take longer for you to start paying yourself? I mean, as well.
The thing is, there is business ups and downs, right? Like
Sure.
there's no smooth path, and I think there is no time where I'm like, oh, things are going well, right? Because I'm like, something's going to go wrong. It's like, what's around the corner? It's like, things going too well. It's like, okay, something's bound to happen. And that mentality has stuck with us since day zero. And I think that is having a healthy level of cynicism is very useful particularly to ground you and keep you humble. Mm-hmm. Right now, I know I'd say we started paying ourselves properly, I guess, like 2 years ago. I say properly, like a salary.
Yeah.
And that was a good experience. That was a very good moment. And then since then, we've been able to take dividends, which was, again, that was a pivotal moment. It was like, hey, I've actually paid a dividend. Like that's a really cool event for me, which a lot of people don't do or can't do or whatever, don't do. But that was another event. But we're in a business is a bit better and, things are good. But again, there's something around the corner inevitably, right? So it's always just healthy to not get too, let's say grateful is good, be grateful, but just know that there's something around the corner.
Winter's always coming.
Exactly, right, exactly. And then just stay humble and don't talk about success all the time.
Sure. And your timeline, I noticed is quite interesting to me when those first 18 months were quite tough in particular, right? And then you started something else maybe 2 years into the journey. Why do that? So Assurity, I'm talking about now.
Oh, Assurity, yeah. So it's the Assurity business was not intentional. So when I was working in SBO, we're doing bookkeeping services, right? And I came from like the corporate advisory, was doing like a lot more interesting, arguably way more valuable work. And inevitably, people were like, "Hey, Jace, I heard you're working for yourself. That's really cool. Hey, we've got this project. Can you help us? Like, we don't want to go to the big four firms, and yeah, you should be cheaper, right?" And I'm like, "No, can't. I'm turning down. I'm saying no to your work because my focus is this. I need hyper focus to get this thing off the ground, and I can't be distracted by dangling, bit of money. Hyper focus. So." Focus. And then, one person asks, another person asks, "Hey, Jess," and then, like I was turning down lots of work, like turning probably, a total of 6 figures worth of consulting work just because I'm like, no, I need to get this stupid bookkeeping thing off the ground. Like, go away. Stop dangling your carrots and distracting me from my mission. And I was chatting to my business partner about it, and he was also getting asked the same thing. And we're like, we spoke to this guy we hang out with, and he was like, if you get asked to do something more than like 3 times, there's probably something there, like a business. And I was like, oh yeah, that's a really good point. And so I actually started to say yes to some of that work, and one of them was preparing an IM for a company that was trying to raise some capital. And that why I said yes to that gig was out of necessity, actually. So this is month 17 of my 18-month runway window, personal runway, and that serendipitously dropped when I was like, oh, okay, I actually need the money, and it was a very well-paying engagement. But that's when I was like, okay, cool, we'll do this, and then we're like, oh, well, I did it for that. What else is there? And so, and then my business partner was also being asked to do that type of work, and it's like, well, why don't we just turn this into a thing? Mm-hmm. It's the same people, different. We had to brand it differently because of different risk profile, different, different insurance policies, and just different services altogether. So we called it a surety, and that was it. Yeah, so that was kind of the second business, and that still exists. It's in the consulting business. I guess it's more hourly rate consulting business there, but a lot more interesting work, but higher risk work, I guess.
Sure. And so, how did you transition from that to deciding that you needed to do the educational piece, the stark naked numbers stuff? Like, when was that on the radar?
Yeah, so about 18 months ago, I love Tim Ferriss. Like Tim Ferriss, I'm sure all of your listeners know who Tim Ferriss and listen to Tim Ferriss podcast. And so he did an interview with Seth Godin, and never heard of Seth Godin until that podcast. Actually,
oh really? Okay.
I knew of Purple Cow, but it was like, to me, it was like read like a kid's book, and I didn't really get into it because, again, I wasn't in business, so I didn't understand the marketing thing, branding. It's like, what the hell? Like, stupid Purple Cow? Like, what? Like, this is a business guy? Like, huh? Yeah. So it was a bit abstract for me at the time. I realized because I didn't have the context of where he comes from, but listen to Seth, and the first interview he did was like, oh man, this guy's awesome. He's like the Yoda of business. He's so wise and articulate, and the way he conveys concepts is like so awesome. It's like, man, this guy can tell a story. And he started to talk about the Alt MBA, which is one of his first, and this is OG Alt MBA, like, we're looking for beta testers to run this thing, online education. We're looking for leaders who want to level up. And I was actually interested in marketing at the time because I wanted to learn marketing because I need to market my business, right? So I got into Seth and was like, oh wow, I've read a few of his books, and I was like, oh, this guy's awesome. I want to do his Alt MBA. So I signed up for the Alt MBA, and I was in the 10th cohort through that program. And that is like that again, I talk about like life change or moments in my life. That was certainly one of them. It was a very transformational experience for me personally and professionally. So you're working with a bunch of random people across the world, and you do projects together. It's a really, and stretched me intellectually quite hard. There's a lot of work involved, but yeah, I felt like I got a lot of good work done on myself, and not necessarily my business, but more myself. But one of the first projects of the Alt MBA was, hey, set a goal, and we're going to teach you how to do proper goal setting. Like, none of this kind of vision boards. Like, we're going to do like the Zig Ziglar method of goal setting. Right, here are the 7 steps. Be specific, set actions. Who you're going to work with, and write a book. And this is the goal, right? This is the goal. And the goal I wrote was, I want to, so my mission, and this is through my life work and my experiences, like I want to improve financial literacy of entrepreneurs. Like, cause this is like working through business experiences. I didn't talk about my parents tried to run a business and that failed, but I think all these combination of factors of like wealth generation, money and business, I'm like, an accountant should be the financial literacy people, but I think there's a gap. So like, this is my mission, and that was always my personal mission, which I developed over time. But I need to kind of get that into the world and make a mark. So the goal is I'm going to write a book on teaching entrepreneurs and accountants and business people how to know their numbers, right? And that was inevitably the book, which is now Stark Naked Numbers. So I set that goal, and I finished the MBA, which was a kind of a 4-week program. So I did that, and then you kind of fall back into old habits kind of thing. But I was really pushing myself to like still carry that energy and apply that practically. And I'm like, I guess I got this book goal that's kind of staring at me. I need to write the book. And so, as most people, you do something new, you just like, I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm just going to try to do it. So I started writing, and I wrote 20,000 words. I don't know if that's good or bad. I was like, okay, here's some writing. I was like, okay, I need an editor because I need to get feedback. I need iterative feedback. Just like my personal trainer, when I was trying to lose weight, I need someone to teach me what the hell I'm doing and at least guide me. So I engaged with a guy who was an alt MBA as well, different cohort, but same group, and he was an editor, a book editor in Minneapolis in America. His name's Fred, a bit older guy, but we connected, and I was like, hey, we had a Slack channel. I was like, looking for an editor to help me on this book project, and he's like, oh yeah, I can help. So we jumped on call and clicked instantly, because the community of the alt MBA, they're all like-minded people. It's a great community. So you instantly gel because you've all come from the same experience.
Sure.
And so we spoke about this book, and he's like, oh, cool. Well, tell me about the concept. I'm like, here's my idea. I'm trying to change, get people engaged in accounting. And he's like, oh, that's tough. I'm like, yeah, I was trying to get this. And then like, well, here's my manuscript. And I'm like, he's like, okay, well, let me read it, and give you some feedback. So a couple of weeks, we set up a Zoom call and we chat. It's like, Jace, I really like the idea behind the book. Like, I think it's great. I think it's needed. I think your idea is great. But what you've written reads like a textbook. It's like, it's everything what you didn't want it to be, like a university textbook. It's a bit of jargon. There's like history, which I don't care about. History is like, what I want you to do is like, throw that away.
Right.
20,000 words, which took me like 6 months.
Wow.
And start again. I was like, oh,
okay.
Again, so like talk about sunk cost bias. I'm like,
yeah, right.
Dude, I spent like 3 hours a morning every morning writing that, and I was like, start again.
We can't keep 2,000 words.
No. Well, there were little bits I could take, but like not all. So
Sure.
It's like, oh god damn, that sucked. So I was like, dude, why didn't I just get this help from the beginning? And he goes, what I want you to do is like think about a couple of things. Let's start with, if you're at a pub with your mate and you want to tell them like the 80-20 rule of accounting, like how would you teach it? And think rather than talking. And I realized is like, I was writing for myself. I wasn't writing for the audience. And I didn't know who that audience was. So he was like, who is your audience? Who is your persona? And write to them. So I was like, oh, that's a super interesting way of thinking about it. Because again, I'm new to marketing, and to marketing people is like, write to your customer, not for yourself, you idiot. But like, I didn't know. I'm an accountant, man. So then I went to the whiteboard, and then I was like, okay, who's my person? I pictured my client. So like, he's Brendan, digital agency owner. He's a real life. Hey, Brendan, if you listen to this, it's like, yeah, beard, wears a hat, typical agency bro. But yeah, here's Brendan. I'm going to write to him. And so I started, writing as if I was talking to Brendan about concepts. And then that helped me then develop a contents page about what the things I want to talk about for Brendan. But then I realized that, oh, wait, Brendan's business is a service business. What about a retail business? How does that? Very different tactics, different KPIs, different everything. So it's like I needed a separate persona. I need someone else who is not Brendan. Ideally, someone who runs that type of business model. And so I came with Sarah. So Sarah, the Naomi from Red Balloon type persona.
Sure. Yep.
What's her Naomi something?
Naomi Simpson.
That's her.
Yep.
So that was the persona I was writing for. Naomi Simpson, retail type business, power woman executives. Like, yeah, that's the persona I write for Sarah. And so I was able to write, and this is all from Fred's feedback and input, was like write a narrative and write the advice to those people, and then and structure it in a way. So the book process took me close to, from start to finish, 2 years.
Wow, right.
And a lot of effort. So and Fred is one of my closest friends. We go on Zoom every single Sunday. We talk about, give him some work, he review it, edit it, talk about feedback. And one of the biggest things I learned from him So Fred's background, he writes scripts for Hollywood. So he's a physics teacher, runs an agency, and also writes sci-fi movie scripts for Hollywood, and is actually pitching some work to Netflix at the moment.
Sure. Okay.
So he's a natural storyteller and is a great teacher and coach. And so he was teaching me a bit about, or coaching me on how to introduce narrative into my story, right? Narrative into the numbers and combine the numbers with the story, and how you can get people to resonate and really understand that. And a lot of my writing chops now, which I try to write frequently, not always, nowhere near as disciplined as I used to be, but a lot of it comes from story and learning how to incorporate story into advice, even with clients, or when you're trying to convey an idea, how can you weave in context and bit of an arc into to get the message across, which is a super, super powerful skill.
Yes. And you have done a really good job of that with the book. It was very, for something that's people might be averse to reading on the, about numbers, and it's got the stereotype that it's boring or whatever. I don't know how I actually like numbers, but it read really well from start to finish. So you obviously certainly did a good job of that. I'd be interested in what it's done for you. So once you have released it into the world, people have read it. You're an author now. I suppose you can call yourself an author. What has that meant for you?
When people ask why you write a book, I think there's two views. I think from the marketers say, hey, write a book because you're going to build profile and you'll be seen as an authority and you're going to get clients, right? And that was never, ever the intention. Like I went to those key person of influence type thing. And, sure. I went to one of those free seminars, and there's some really good content in those. But I think one of them, they had some author up there. It's like, everyone here should write a book. You're all knowledge. They attract knowledge professions, IT people, accountants, lawyers. Like everyone should write a book. This is why you should write a book. And it was, and I agree with parts of this. Like it's a great way to express yourself. Like writing is an enormous way to express yourself, get clarity of thought. If you're a clear writer equals clear thinking. Put concepts into paper so you can productize and systemize all this stuff. But I think what they were getting at was like, hey, it's for branding, right? If you're an authority leader in law, you write a book on law or commercial law or property law, you are the guy, because people are like, oh, you've written a book, you must be special. You must be the expert. And I think sometimes that's from a marketing and brand purpose. Yeah, sure, it certainly does tick that box. But for me, it was never about that. Like I didn't expect anything to come of it. It was like literally what it was for was, number one, we need to fix financial literacy. So that is the core focus. The second focus was that we work with a lot of retail businesses where, we get up a new client, they send us some product. It's like, hey, and here's our thing. It's like, oh, that's really cool. As a service-based business, like you have nothing really to offer that's tangible, like product, and I'm like, so it'd be really nice to say, hey, I wrote this for you. Like, this is yours. I don't care if you read it or not, but like, here's a gift, right? And that's something that reflects me as being authentic myself, and also hopefully you'll learn something. So I think that to me, that was an act of generosity, and something I could give. So yes, that was why I wrote it. And ultimately to create change. What it has done is, I think I've noticed that people do see you a little bit differently, as certainly a little bit of an authority figure, or they see you as, oh wow, you must be not famous, but you're accomplished. But when you talk to them, I'm like, I'm just a guy. There's no secret sauce here. You just do the work and you show up and you do it. And so I think they realize, oh, okay. Sometimes some people are surprised by that, which is fine. But I think it also helps reinforce that narrative, because they're like, oh, I'm just like you. Like, we're all trying to do our best, and humble in many ways. That I'm not trying to call myself. I don't call myself an author. Put it that way. Like, I'm an educator.
Sure.
I'm not an influencer. Like some people said, oh, you're like a business influencer now. Well, LinkedIn influencer. I'm like, dude, do not use my name and influencer in any sentence. Like, I'm here to educate. I'm here to help. Don't call me an influencer, right? Where people like, it's same as entrepreneur. Like entrepreneur is such a title nowadays. Like, and it's just garbage. It's like, I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I run a business, but actually first and foremost, I'm an accountant. Like that's my craft. I'm an accountant first. I also write, also educate, and also run a business. Simple as that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
No, that's it's all really interesting. I can really relate to the fact you're talking about that clarity of thought with the writing. I've recently written a book myself. It's not published yet, but going through that process of, you really work out your philosophy, and you really have to, like, it is almost like a commitment to your philosophy as well, that you put that on paper, okay, or wherever you put it, okay, that's you now. Like, you know, it's hard to take that back.
100%. It is. You literally, it's just stake in the ground. It's like, who's who I am, who's what I stand for, here's my assertion. And I think shipping assertions is risky because they're like, not everyone will agree with you, right? And this is very Seth Godin. I'm coming from Seth Godin here, doing a bad job of emulating it. But it's like, you know, marketing is like to stand out, to get recognized, you need to put a stake in the ground and say, here's what I stand for. And not everyone will agree with you because that's just the nature of humans. Like, not everyone agrees on anything. And so it takes bravery. You got to be generous, and you got to. It's scary, but again, you just got to put your stake in the ground. And I think, particularly if you're writing it from a place of like personal experience, that is, you know, there's a bit of my own story within the book, and I'm sure your book has a bit of your journey and your story. There's an element of vulnerability in there as well, and people start to see, oh, I didn't know about you, Jack. I thought you were just like some confidence bravado guy, like smashing through walls. Like, oh, no, I saw this. I didn't know about that. That's interesting. Like, yeah, tell me more about that.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So from then until now, like, you start up the Arbor Group as well, obviously, that has the parent company in a sense. Maybe just give us a quick run through of what that's been like from maybe probably publishing the book until now, and what you're trying to do. What's the goals for the future?
Yeah, so if you asked me that question like 2 or 3 years ago, the goal was to like, how are we going to build this thing and sell it? So like, and I think that's most entrepreneurs, inverted commas, business people, like that's certainly the sexy narrative around, hey, let's start a business, scale it, make lots of money, flog it, and then start the new thing, right? That was us like 3 years ago, and that probably showed how immature we were potentially as business owners. But I think my business partner, who's also an accountant, Rowan, we sat down and were like, oh, so let's just hypothetically, like if we sold our business, you know, $5 million, we walked away with $1 million each or whatever after tax, what would you do? Probably buy a house. Then we have to get a job again. What would you do? I'd probably start a business. I'm probably in the same profession, right? Because this is a lifelong pursuit for us. We are doing what my business partner runs the funds management side of the group, so the raising capital, investing money. But me, I'm very comfortable in my place at the minute, right, and what I'm doing day to day. So we'll probably just revert to what we are currently doing. And so it's like, well, why sell? Because we end up in the same position. Like, why don't we just keep the money and reinvest the profits or pay dividends and do whatever we want with it? So I think the vision now is basically we're trying to be a 50-year company. Like, this is life's work. And wow, I think the pressure, as soon as we made that realization, the pressure comes off instantly, because you're not forced by artificial growth targets. You're not like, oh man, when we set our business plan 2 years ago, we said the hockey stick would be here, and we're still at the handle down the other end. You know, what the hell? And you realize that all this is garbage. It's all made up, right? Why set arbitrary growth targets? Like, why? Are you happy? Are you doing good work? Are you just focused on the process again? So as soon as you take that pressure off, you're like, oh, cool, I can make better decisions. I can take things a little bit slower, be a bit more careful about what I do, just ease it back a bit, and just be a bit more thoughtful about how I carry myself in the market, or I might do branding, and you can just be a bit more patient with things. And actually that has been more effective than, I guess, what I previously would have done, was like, you say yes to everything because you want to focus on top line, not necessarily good, sustainable growth. It's like, you know, Jocko Willink, it's like slow is smooth, smooth is fast type thing. It's like, you know, let's take it slowly, build the systems, and do it in our own pace, really. And so the goal for us is just, you know, long term, again, I'll be doing this for the rest of my life. So that in itself is like a very calming kind of frame. It's like, it's okay. We don't have to get it right today. You know, I've got next week, I've got next month, I've got next year. Yes, there is complacency around that. It's like, if you don't got my whole life to do something, I'll just do it next year or next 10 years. But so you still need to, you know, build some accountability around that to kill the complacency. But it does certainly help you think about things more thoughtfully and put some more rigor around what you're doing.
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, we'll wrap up soon, but what do you have any parting words for maybe any business owners, maybe aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are a year or 18 months into their business? What would be your message to them?
I'm not good with like giving advice from that side of things, but what I suggest is everything's a process, right? And don't get fed up if you don't hit your goals, or if growing as fast as you wanted. Focus on the things that you can control and focus on yourself. I think we, as humans and everything, we have a habit of comparing ourselves against other people or against other brands or what's in the media. Just like focus on yourself, just do the work, show up. And I think and the other thing I'd add to that is, I think most of the work is just showing up. Like that is, and again, that's a Seth Godin thing.
Yeah.
You just show up, you do the work, and eventually things will happen because you'll make them happen. Like you're just there. And I think, again, most people don't finish things because they give up halfway. They as soon as it gets hard, the dip, they just kind of like, it's too difficult, and then they move on to the next thing. Where if you're really passionate about it, if you really want to get something done, you'll do the work and you focus on the process rather than the outcome, and you'll see that it starts to pay dividends.
Sure. Awesome advice. All right. Well, if anyone wanted to find you, where can they find you? How can they get in touch? What about and your businesses? Where should they go to find them?
Yeah, I'll make it really easy. Jump on LinkedIn and just search Jason Andr, and you'll find me there. I post actively on LinkedIn. I'm not very good with any other channels. We have a website, sbo.financial, but yeah, just find me on LinkedIn and shoot me a DM if you want to chat.
Awesome. Jason, it's been an amazing story. Thanks so much for coming and sharing that with me. I really, really appreciate that. I really respect what you've done, and kudos for everything. I mean, you've done what a lot of people can't.
Thank you, Jack. It's really kind, and this has been an awesome experience to the theory. So thanks again.
Really appreciate it. All right. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you. See ya.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Push Podcast. Show notes can be found at bethepush.com/podcast and clicking on the relevant episode link. Remember to subscribe, and I look forward to talking to you again soon.